but I found his like take on love very interesting. Like very religious.
I'm getting very religious. Is that what you're saying?
Yes.
Okay, yes. Remember, I warned you, right? He's using religious language. But today we're going to find out that beneath this religious language, he's talking about something universal, right? So you have to be able to go beyond the religious garb to the universal truth that he's talking about, which I'll bring out today. We will definitely. So yeah, I told you this was going to be a barrier for some of you, right? Be like, all this Christian stuff. Okay, good. Karalashvili, anything to add to what you just said or what I said? Okay, good. Rodriguez, any comments?
I enjoyed it. It was a breath of fresh air compared to Kant.
Yes.
We can actually read it and comprehend what he was saying. But I mean, I also had, like I made some notes. I like where he's beginning with this. Is like how we like how we can discern love, I guess. How the temporal and eternal, I guess. I like that.
Okay, good. You liked his language.
Yes.
Mhm.
And yeah, I guess I'm gonna say the same thing. I had to get past the Christian philosophy a bit to look beyond really what he was saying.
Yeah, very good. Yeah, you have to be able to always with these texts, right? You have to go beyond the barrier of language, beyond the barrier of the culture, of the religion, right? A lot of us struggle, and then you have to get to the truth. That's the universal truth that's there, right? So that's the kind of the study abroad challenge we have here, right? With all these different texts. One more lover. It's between Ben or Rivera. Who wants to speak?
Rivera, you got this.
Sure.
All right, Rivera.
I mostly enjoyed it because I liked how it was, you can understand it. Like I think this is the first one I actually fully understood without having to read it more than like twice. I also liked how this one, besides like the first one we read, Song of Songs, this one I like that you can tell that he's experienced love and he's actually talking about like love. And like in the beginning, it sounds like he's kind of talking to himself from what we learned about in class before about the mistakes he made and like how he canceled his engagement because he got scared of love and like what was actually happening. I like in the beginning, he sounds like he's talking to himself and kind of guiding people who may have thought like him, like, and just saying you've made the biggest mistake of your life because you're going to feel this for the rest of your life. Like it's not
Good.
something that goes away. Like, you're going to always feel it.
Excellent, Rivera. Yes, he's really, you can sense he's talking about experience, his own experience, right? You can sense that he himself, right? When he talks about being cheated out of love, how this is coming from himself, right? He himself was cheated out of love, right? And now we're able to, us at least, learn from his mistakes and not be cheated out of love, right? Okay, any last comments or questions before I get into the text? Anybody want to add anything to what we just said? Rivera, your hand is still up. Does that mean you want?
Oh, nope, I just forgot to take it down.
Okay. Any other comments? All right. Okay.
I have a quick
Yes.
question. It's
Go ahead.
Rodriguez.
Go ahead.
Are you going to address, because I guess one of my questions that in my discussion group I asked, what is he talking about self-deception? What is self-deception to Kierkegaard?
To be
Self-deceived. Self-deceived.
I would have to have the exact page, but I think he's talking about how we can fool ourselves into or cheat ourselves, right? Out of love, right? By thinking that simply by being afraid or by chickening out. So he's talking about this is the biggest way we cheat ourselves by despairing of love. Maybe that's what I would have to have the exact passage. Do you have it right now? The page?
It's on page 23, like the end, and page 24, the beginning.
Okay, yeah, that's it. Yes, to cheat oneself out of love is really this notion of thinking that love doesn't exist. A lot of us are on that path, right? We've experienced heartbreak, and then we tell ourselves, yeah, love doesn't exist. This is, you know, we become cynical, we become hopeless when it comes to love. We think, yeah, maybe I'll get a few hookups, or, you know, but love, no, that doesn't exist. So that's how he felt, right? And that's what he's saying. This is the biggest deception that we can have, because love does exist. Why? Because we create it, right? Those who talk about how love doesn't exist, they think they can just stumble on love, right? And love is just going to happen to them, right? But Kierkegaard is going to show us that love does exist because it's in our hands to create it or not, right? Does that make sense? Does that answer your question? We're going to talk about that, of course, today. Does that answer your questions?
It does.
Okay, very good. Right, so we'll talk about that. How do we, right, so make sure you jot this down, right, that for Kierkegaard, he's not just an idealist, he's not just, you know, Walt Disney mentality, right? He's saying he believes in love. Why? Because it lies in our hands. We have the power to create lasting love. This is the good news, right, that Kierkegaard has found in the Gospels, and that he's going to expound on here for us today. Okay, so let's get to the text. I'm on page 23. I'm starting there. He begins on that page. Yes, Korelashvili, you have a question?
No, I don't. I don't have a question.
Okay. All right, put down your hand. Confusing me.
Oh, I didn't mean to put that.
Okay, very good. All right, so on page 23, and Kierkegaard there begins with a quote from the Gospels. Now, if you're familiar with the Gospels and you see how the teachings of Jesus were recorded, it's very succinct, right? They're just a few teachings that are just one or two sentences, and the Gospels really don't get into the details, what Jesus meant by some of his metaphors and images. So Kierkegaard is going to take one of these teachings, a very short teaching that we find in the Gospel, which is hard to understand because there's no explanation in the Gospels, and he's going to expound on it for about 50 pages, right? So page 23, are you with me? The top of the page, for each tree. Everybody's there?
Yeah.
Okay, but yes, just say yes, because I can't see you. Okay, very good. All right, I'm reading from the Gospel of Luke. For each tree, the Gospel says, is known by its own fruit. For figs are not gathered from thorns, nor are grapes picked from a bramble bush. Okay, so it's very short teaching, very strange. And Kierkegaard is going to elaborate on this. The first thing we get from this teaching is that we are to be compared to a tree. In other words, the lover that we are like a tree. Now, if I had the board, I could draw you this beautiful tree, but I don't, right? So I want you to imagine a tree. And there are actually two main sections of the tree we're going to talk about, right? So first of all, you have the tree going up and turning into what? Anybody know?
Leaves?
Yes, you have the branches that give us leaves and eventually fruits, right? So the tree is, the goal of the tree, the direction the tree is going is towards leaves and fruits. But to do this, the tree has to go in the opposite direction towards what?
It's roots.
The ground?
The roots or the ground, right? So these are the two main sections I want you to remember that we're going to talk about, right? The leaves and the fruits, and the roots and the ground, and what Kierkegaard will talk about, the source, right? We're going to talk about that. So let's first talk about this part, this section about the fruit of love, or the leaf of love. What does it mean, right? So first thing we know when we compare ourselves to a tree is that ultimately, what is the goal of the tree, right? Is the goal of the tree to receive rain? And so what's the ultimate, what is the highest fulfillment of the tree? What do you think? In other words, when has the tree reached its full maturity?
When it blossoms.
Yeah.
Exactly, right? As long as the tree is just a trunk, or it's just, branches, it's not yet fully a tree. It's fully a tree. It reaches full potential when it starts to have leaves and fruits. In other words, what makes the tree mature and what constitutes the full potential of the tree is when it begins to give fruit, right? So this is the same for us, right? We tend to think, oh, love is that good feeling I have. Love is finally being loved, agathon, right? Love is finally having this, this home, this comfort. Actually, no, love is a fruit, according to Kierkegaard. Love is, what is love? Love is giving, not so much receiving. Love is bearing fruit giving of yourself, pouring of yourself out into the world, right? So this is fundamental. We talked about this again, right? A lot of us, all of us actually, usually think of love as something you can get, something you can receive. What Kierkegaard is saying is no, fundamentally, and make sure you write this down, love is something you give. It's something you offer. That's what it means to be a tree known by its fruit, right? Okay, so that's the first thing we see, is that the sign that we have reached mature love is the fact that we're not thinking of receiving, but we're thinking of giving. And this is, remember, I told you, this is the fundamental shift we have to make in our mindset if we're going to be happy in love, right? As long as we haven't made this shift, we'll always be waiting for the other to cater to all of our needs, and they will never cater to all of our needs, and so we will always be miserable, right? The shift that Kierkegaard is asking us to do is really about, don't think of receiving, think about giving, and in doing so, you will find a joy which is not based on how the other reacts or acts. You are simply overflowing into their lives, right? Okay, so that's the first thing. So second element is that based on this, we realize that love is more than a feeling for Kierkegaard. Now, unlike Kant, he's not against feelings, right? Kant was really against feelings. Kant was saying, as soon as you have a feeling, you have to crush it and listen to your reason, right? Now, Kierkegaard is not against feeling, but for him, feeling is not enough. In other words, what has to happen beyond the feeling according to Kierkegaard? Does anybody remember? This was on page 29. You can go there already, page 29. What must happen beyond the feeling? What is the sign of true love for Kierkegaard? Is it just a passionate feeling, or is it something more?
I mean, he talks about, right, that the emotion is not ours, but the others. Is that what you're talking about?
Yes, but beyond the emotion, love is something more than an emotion for Kierkegaard. Can anybody tell me what? So, sorry, go ahead.
The deeds.
Deeds, exactly, right? Absolutely. Let's read together on page 29. Okay, go to page 29 and go. Do you see where you have the small footnote 7 towards the middle of the page? Okay. If you see it, say yes. Nobody.
Yeah.
Yes.
Ends with heart.
What heart? I don't have a heart.
It says heart and then
Yeah.
7.
Yes,
Abundant.
heart and then 7. Yes, very good. Okay, so I'm reading right before that, right? Actually, right after that. Okay, so you should not be ashamed, all right? So this is what Kierkegaard says, right? You should not be ashamed of your feelings. So he's not, right, like Kant, saying that feelings don't matter. What matters is to do the right thing. Your feelings, forget about them, right? Anyways, they're from the instinct level. So he's not saying that. He's saying we should not be ashamed of our feelings. Our feelings are important. They're the beginning of love. They're the kindling of love. Right? And he says also still less of honestly giving to each one his due. In other words, we should not be ashamed to express our feelings, right? To say, I love you, I feel this for you, right? Nevertheless, he says this, one should not love in word and with devices of speech, and neither should one regard them as sure marks of love. In other words, the feeling is not enough. That you have a loving feeling doesn't mean yet that you love the person. Why is that? He says this, on the contrary, by such fruits, and by their being merely leaves, one should know that love has not had time for growth, okay? And that ultimately, he says this, now go to the last paragraph, second line. If it is really to bear fruit, are you there? Say yes.
Yeah.
No,
Last paragraph, second line. If it is really to bear fruit. Now who's there?
Yes.
Okay, great. Okay, so now he says, ultimately, right, the sign of true love, if it is really to bear fruit and consequently be recognizable by its fruit, it must form a heart. So we'll come back to this metaphor in a second. But basically what Kierkegaard is saying is that yes, the feeling is important, but if it is not accompanied by actions of love, it shows how immature your love still is, right? The feeling is only the beginning. It's not the end, right? Ultimately, this feeling should start to it should start to bring forth actions of love. So now this is so important to know, and it can really help us be compassionate with people who are not that nice, even though they say they love us, right? We all know these couples where, one of them will be like, but I love you so much, but then they treat them like horrible. I mean, not that great, right? Or we have been loved by someone like that, right? Who says they love us, but then they do all these things that doesn't show love. We can be reassured, says Kierkegaard, they're not lying when they say they love us and yet still do these bad things. They're simply immature. In other words, their love has not yet blossomed yet into fruits. It's still just on the level of the trunk it's still growing, right? So we learn two things from this, right? First of all, that the sign of true love is actions, how you act, not so much how you feel. But ultimately, it helps us to be understanding with some of our partners who are still growing, who do love us, and this can be very sincere love, but they still need time for their feelings to, how shall I say it, to be transformed or to be, what's the word for this? To the feelings to blossom, right, into actions, right? So that's what he's saying here is ultimately we have to, our feelings must blossom into actions. And if it hasn't done so yet, doesn't mean we don't love, doesn't mean we're not loved. It simply means the love needs more time to grow and blossom and mature into these actions. So he talks about here that he has the expression to form a heart, right? The love is not only, right, pulsing in the heart, it has to begin to reshape this heart, right? In fact, this is one of the most beautiful moments in the experience of love, right? The power that love has to transform our beings, right? When we're in love, we want to become better. We want to become sweeter. We want to become gentler. And it is at this moment that the love is not just, pulsing and, making us feel warm. The love is also transforming us, shaping us, reworking us, right? So that's really, for Kierkegaard, the power of love. The power that love has to transform us from within. And we should allow this process to take place. We should get to that point. Okay, good. So, good. So in conclusion, right, the main thing we're learning here that we saw already with Rumi, right? Remember when Rumi talks about love as a business transaction? I give you, if you give me, I give you.
Yeah.
Kierkegaard is really close to Rumi when he says love is about giving, it's not about receiving. It's about, like the tree is not thinking, oh, am I gonna get any apples back, right? When I'm giving you 10 apples, what am I getting? But the tree is not thinking about what it's gonna get, right? The tree is simply naturally, spontaneously giving fruit. And this is the point to which we must get if we want to reach maturity. Instead of always be thinking, okay, I'll give you an apple if you give me an apple, right? And we're like this, all stingy. And then just love, right? That's what Kierkegaard is saying. Just don't be afraid to bear fruit, because this is really the highest level of fulfillment you will ever reach. It's not the other that fulfills you. It's our capacity to love that fulfills us. It's a paradox, right? The more we give, the more fulfilled we feel, according to Kierkegaard, right? Make sure you write this down. It's a paradox, right? The more we give, the more we offer of our love, the more we are blossoming, the more we are becoming fulfilled, the more we are maturing as lovers. Okay, so any questions so far before I get to the next part? Or any problems or, discomfort with anything that I said?
Yeah, I just want to know the quotes again that you talked about.
Okay, so I started on page 23 with the quote from the teachings of Jesus, and then I skipped to page 29 where you have the little footnote 7, and then I read on page 29 the last paragraph on forming a heart. Does that work?
Yeah, I don't know where the forming
the heart, last paragraph on page 29, the third line, it must form a heart. You got it? Yes?
Yeah.
Okay, good. All right, now, So some of you might be thinking, since you're not saying it, I know you're thinking it, well, this is all nice, you know, giving, giving, giving. But what if my beloved doesn't give me anything? And I'm sitting there, I'm the giver. And you know people like this, right? You know people like this, where one of them is just giving, giving, the other one is just taking, taking, right? So what happens, right, when you're with somebody? So you're all willing, right, to be the tree. Yes, that makes sense. But what happens when you're living with someone who's not willing to be a tree, right? Instead, they're just taking your fruits, right? What happens? Or you're with someone who used to be giving and stopped being giving, right? They're going through something, or the love has cooled, and now they've kind of withdrawn into themselves. They're not giving as they used to. This is, by the way, classic, right? Every relationship, I'm hearing so many relationships where the person, one of the partners is saying, yeah, man, he used to be so loving and he used to do this and he used to do that, and now nothing, right? So we will all get to that point, actually, where we sense our beloved is not giving us as much as we are willing to give them. So what happens then? How do we survive if I'm the one giving and no one is giving to me? How do I remain strong? How do I remain loving? Where do I find my nourishment? Where do I find my strength, right? If I am in a period of drought where I am the only one bearing fruit and I'm not getting any fruit from the other, how do I survive, right? In this wilderness where I am not being watered. I am watering the other, but they're not watering me. And so this brings us to the next part of the tree. What did I tell you the next section of the tree was? In other words, let me ask you this question. Suppose the tree is giving its fruit and everything is good there, but it's not receiving any fruit. Yet the tree has a way to become nourished. How does the tree do it? Suppose there is no rain, it's not getting any rain. What can the tree still do in order to survive? Anybody there?
Like, what do you mean? Like, let's say if it wasn't raining at all.
Yep, if it's not raining at all, the tree is in danger of dying, but it has a certain resource it can tap into. What is that resource? We talked about it at the beginning of class.
Taking soil from the ground,
Very good.
nutrients.
Yes,
Roots.
very good, Coralashvili, right? The tree has roots which can go deep into an inner source, what Kierkegaard calls the inner source. In other words, now make sure you pay very much attention, because this is fundamental. If this is true, we've resolved all our problems, right? What Kierkegaard is saying is that even when we receive no rain or no sunlight from our environment, and here we are trying to bear fruit with no rain, we still have a resource. And that resource Kierkegaard calls the inner source. This is where the tree goes deep into the ground, and us likewise can go deep into the ground, and we'll talk about what that means. But we have access, according to Kierkegaard, to a deep and secret source where we can draw the love that we need in these times of drought. Okay, so let me say that again so you can write it down, right? So in case we end up in a drought, what happens when I'm the only one giving fruit and I do not get rain or sunlight or nothing in return? How do I survive? Well, Kierkegaard says, like the tree, I have access to a deep and secret source that can renew me, that can strengthen me, that can give me the resources that I need to continue loving, even though the other person is not able to love me in the way I need them to at the moment, hopefully, right? This is temporary, hopefully, right? So let's look at this, right? He talks about this on page 27. Now, obviously, this is a concept which has been developed in Christianity and in many religions, but what I want to make sure you understand is that this concept is also a universal concept. What Kierkegaard is about to describe, make sure you write this down, what he's about to describe in Christian language, right, is actually a fundamental human experience. This is
What page?
I'm on page 27.
Okay, thank you.
I'm going to read in a second, right? So let me say that again, right? What Kierkegaard is about to describe to us in this kind of Christian language is a fundamental human experience. This is something that we can all experience because we are human beings, because we are wired like we are wired, because we're built like we are built, right? Now, okay. So let's go to this text, page 27. I'm actually starting on page 26. Okay, so you go to the second section on 26, where you have love's hidden life and its recognizability by its fruits. Right there, I'm going to start reading. Everybody's here? Say yes if you are.
Where?
Page 26, the second section.
Oh. Mm-hmm.
From whence comes love? Who's there?
Uh-huh.
Yes?
Yes, yes.
Okay, very good. All right, so I'm reading. So now he's talking about this deep inner source, right, that we all have access to, and I have to yet explain, right, what this is, but what he's talking about, right? But let's just read what he says, and then I will comment. So he begins, from whence comes love, right? Where does it have its origin and its source? In other words, there is a source. Beyond what the beloved is giving us, there is a source that exists within each one of us. Where is its place? Where is the stronghold from which it proceeds? Certainly this place is hidden, or is in that which is hidden. And then this is the part you underline. There is a place in a human being's most inward depths. Now mind this, he's saying human being, not Christian. He's not saying there is a place in the believer's inward depths. He's saying this is a human experience, which obviously Christianity has spoken about. Other religions also have spoken about, but as a philosopher, we can also speak about it because it's a fundamental human concept. There is a place in a human being's most inward depths. From this place proceeds the life of love. Right, then he goes into details on page 27. Second paragraph on 27, the hidden life of love. Who is there?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm here.
The hidden life of love is in the most inward depths, unfathomable, and still has an unfathomable relationship with the whole of existence. And this is the part you underline. As the quiet lake is fed deep down by the flow of hidden springs, which no eye sees, so a human being's love is grounded still more deeply in God's love. Okay, so now you're thinking, okay, so see, God is here again in the picture. This excludes half the class. All of us who do not believe in God, right? What is this? I don't have God. Who says, right? So let me remind you, right? Let's go back to what I talked about when I talked about the existentialist view on transcendence, right? Remember I drew you? Let's draw again. I compared Plato and Plato's view of human existence and the existentialist view, right? Remember?
Yeah.
Whoa,
Yeah.
whoa, whoa. Can you guys see?
Yes, yes.
No, not really.
I know, right? Okay, let me draw more dark. Okay, this is why is this okay? Everybody stop talking so I can show you this. Okay, yes, you can see. Okay, good.
The number 80.
What?
The number 80.
Yeah, okay, sure. Yes, draw the number 80, then you'll have it down in front of you. Okay, so the 8 of the 80, this is Plato, right? With the material in the bottom and then the transcendence, right? The spiritual in the top. And you have to, what do you have to do to reach the spiritual for Plato? Remind me?
Leave the material.
Exactly, right? That's what for example, Pausanias was saying, right? We have to stop loving physical body, we have to love the soul to reach mature love, right? So now the existentialists, remember, they rewrite the script and they say, actually, it's by loving, it's by living, it's by entering life that we access the spiritual, right? In other words, there is exactly what Kierkegaard is saying here. There is a core at the heart of existence, which is of a different dimension, of a different nature. It's transcendent, it's spiritual, it's profound, and we have access to it. Every single human being, no matter what is our background. Okay, let me say that again, right? So you can jot this down. According to the existentialists, there's a dimension at the core of existence, not outside of existence, in the middle of existence, at the core, at the center of existence, which is of a different substance than existence. It's transcendent, it's spiritual, it's profound. And we have access to it in as much as we choose to exist. The more we exist, the more we love, the more we enter life, the more we suffer, the more we enjoy, right? The closer we come to this spiritual dimension, right? Now, this is not new, this idea that at the center of existence, there is a spiritual core. I didn't mention this in the introduction, but you have this idea throughout the spiritual traditions, right? So here we have it in philosophy, but you have this idea, for example, I'm going to write some technical terms here. You have it in Hinduism, right? I'm chatting with you now. So in Hinduism, you have this view that there is a center to life to which we have access. This is called Brahman, right? Which is the center, spiritual center of life, right? And so anybody have any idea in Hinduism how we can access this transcendent dimension in life, according to Hinduism?
Is it through fasting?
Yes, but more specifically in Hinduism, how do you access this deep inner source of light, of transcendence? What's the main practice they do to access it?
Meditation.
Meditation, very good, right? So you see, you have this idea in Hinduism that there is a deep dimension within ourselves, right? Hinduism is precise. This dimension is not somewhere, you know, in the other galaxy. It's within ourselves. It's there, waiting to be tapped into. But we are so up here with our thoughts that we are not able to connect to it. That's why we meditate to clear our thoughts so we can begin, so this dimension can begin to, so we can begin to connect to this dimension. Koralashvili, you have a question?
Yeah, did you type in chat? Because I can't see it.
Oh, I just wrote Hinduism and the dimension of Brahman. You don't see the chat? Oh, because
No.
I chatted with Ellis, that's why.
Yeah.
I'll do that. Okay, thank you. Okay, Hinduism, concept of Brahman. Right, thank you, Koralashvili. I'm still technically new. So, okay, you have this idea in Chinese philosophy, especially in Taoism. Okay, I'm writing it down. This is the notion of the concept of Tao. Now we don't have any Chinese with us today, but if you're from Flushing, some of you, so you would know how, so this same thing, right? This deep dimension, spiritual dimension at the core of, in Taoism, it's within and also in nature. How does Chinese philosophy, what are some of the practices in Taoism or in Chinese thought whereby we can connect to the Tao? Anybody? This is more sophisticated. Anybody know how they do it? Shibilia? What do you see if you go to Flushing, to any park? You're going to see a practice that is done communally here and also throughout China, throughout
Tai Chi.
exactly, Tai Chi, Qigong, right? These are practices that look strange to us, right? Let me write them down, right? These are movements that they're doing. It looks like they're stretching. What are they doing, right? Actually, they're connecting to this dimension through these movements, right? This is their way of, again, clearing their mind and becoming attuned to the dimension of the Tao, which for them is both in nature and within, right? So you have in Greek thought, you have the same idea, right? So ancient Greek thought, right? Not so much Plato, with the concept of the nous, or the intelligence of nature, right? Right, they have the same idea that life is, yes, it looks chaotic on the outside, but there is a deep intelligence that is ordering everything. This is why, according to Stoicism, we can trust in nature, we can trust in life, because life is fundamentally intelligent. We don't need to worry what the next step is, or I made so many mistakes, or where am I going, and how is this going to end? We don't need to worry. As long as we align ourselves to the course of nature, we are in good hands, because nature is intelligent, life is intelligent. Okay, so have I made my point about this this deep dimension, right? Sorry, who is speaking? Is somebody has a question? No. Right. Yes, Alice. I see you guys popping up, but where is we? Okay, good. All right. So let me. Right. So hopefully, I've made my point that, or I've supported a little bit what Kierkegaard is saying when he's talking about a deep inner dimension, right? Into which we can tap, right? he's saying something which is a truth which can be found universally, right? The Hindus have spoken of it, the Taoists have spoken of it, ancient Greek philosophy, Stoicism, Christianity, right? And now he's doing so in the context of existentialism, right? So this is a dimension which is universal, which is part of what it means to be human. We have access to this deep source, which can, if we access it, right? If we properly access it, we can be capable of loving and bearing fruit even though we are in the wilderness. Okay, let me say that again, right? So according to Kierkegaard and according to all of these traditions, right, there is indeed a deep inner secret source into which we can tap, which we can access, to which we can connect. And once we have connected, we can receive, right, the nourishment, the strength, the courage we need, or the wisdom to blossom, right? Even though there is a drought around us, even though our beloved is not giving us what we need, and so forth, right? So this is what we read on page 27 with the Christian language, but this is really a fundamentally human experience that Kierkegaard is talking about. Now, a lot of you are thinking, oh, I didn't know I had this source. I sure don't feel like I have a source, right? A lot of us are in relationships or will be or have been where we feel totally depleted, right? I don't feel a source. Where? What source, right? I just feel tired. I feel angry. I feel resentful. I feel like this is never going to end. I feel hopeless, right? According to Kierkegaard, we feel like this because we have lost our connection to our source. And so the key here, the fundamental, essential key is how do we connect to that source, right? This is the $1,000,000 question. So make sure you write this down. If it is really true that there is such a source, right? And we have many witnesses of this, right? Like what I told you in Hinduism, Taoism, and so forth. If this is really true that we have such a source to which we can connect, to draw the resources we need to blossom, even though everything around us is barren, then the $1,000,000 question is this: how do we connect to this source? And this I will reveal to you next time. So I'm leaving you in suspense for now. So, any questions on anything I said so far?
So basically, instead of going for it and, saying, oh, well, if this person is not giving me love, instead of saying, okay, well, this is the end of the relationship, you have to be able to sustain yourself. But for like, how long would that be?
Okay, very good question, right? So obviously Kierkegaard is not telling us we should stay or we should leave. Remember, he doesn't care what we decide to do, right? But what he's saying is that if you decide to stay, here are the resources you need to know about, right? And if this source is really what he describes it to be, which we'll see next time, he describes it as the eternal. He calls it the eternal, meaning there's a dimension of infinity in this source. Then in a way we can tap into it infinitely and never go out, never run out of resources, right? So technically, according to Kierkegaard, we can do this infinitely and survive and really thrive infinitely, even though the situation is dire, right? Now you might ask, Ellis, but at one point you want the other person to, respond or react, right? So we'll see about this next time. We'll talk about this next time. In other words, as we begin to connect to the source, what impact does this have on the relationship, right? Because we'll see it does have an impact. So it's not just resourcing yourself. As you're resourcing yourself, you are having an impact on the relationship. Your fruits are not just falling to the ground and rotting away, right? Your fruits are creating a reality. This is fundamental. Let me say that again, because we'll talk about this again next time in great detail. But as you're being nourished by your own source, and we'll have to see how to connect next time, right? But as we're being nourished by the source, we are not bearing fruit in vain, right? Our fruits have an impact on the relationship. And this is what will be the significance of hope when we talk about it, right? So does that answer partly your question, Ellis?
Me, you mean?
You're good?
Yeah, but not Ellis. It's Ben.
Oh, that wasn't Ellis?
No.
Sorry. Okay, Ben, sorry. Yes, Ben, does that answer, does that answer your
Yeah, a little.
A little bit. Go on. If you have a follow-up, this is important. This will help me develop what he's trying to say. What's
All
your
right. Well, the thing is that then does that still make it love? Like, I would imagine he would say that love is on both playing fields. And if it's only one-sided, does it mean like, let's say if someone's a stalker, for example, would that mean that they have love for someone then? Because, they're always giving per se, but the person's not giving back because most likely they aren't aware or don't want it.
Okay, let me answer your two questions. Right. First of all, if it's a one-way relationship, only one person is giving, can we still call it love? Kierkegaard would say yes, because love is not about the love for Kierkegaard is not really between people. It's really something that's emerges out of you. So you can have, for example, you can still call it love even if the other doesn't respond in love, because you are still acting lovingly and love is still emanating from you, right? So it's love, but not so much reciprocated, but it's still love, right? Now the stalker, we have to ask, do they really love? Right? Because yes, they have the feelings, but their feelings have not blossomed into actions which are loving. If you're stalking me, that's not a loving action, right? So the stalker, yes, is in the beginning of love. Certainly for Kierkegaard, you can take these emotions seriously, but still needs to form heart and become a lover that is, not
sanity.
Yes, exactly.
Third question then.
Sure.
So then, are actions, are these self-defined, or is actions dependent on the person?
So obviously, yes. Okay, that's a good question. That's a good question. I don't know if Kierkegaard would respond to that particular. I mean, definitely the action is coming from the self, and we're going to talk about the fundamental loving action, which is hope, right? Which is something that emerges from the self. But obviously, right, we need to learn, if we're going to take care of the other as another tree, right, we need to learn how to water that tree, how to take care of that tree, so the other does help us fine-tune what kind of actions are needed, right? We need to know what the other needs before we can lovingly cater to them, right? Because I know many people who do something for the other person they think is loving, and the other person is like, what are you doing? So definitely, yes, we have to learn to polish our actions in a way that the other can receive them as love, right? Any other questions from Ben or anybody else?
Yeah, I have a quick question.
Sure, go ahead.
So in essence, he's saying that it doesn't matter, like each individual person has this inner source, and it doesn't really matter what other people's actions are, or whatever their action is basically fundamentally our action that defines everything. So it's how we're reacting to the outside.
So yeah, you, in a way, your love is not based on your environment. That's really what we're learning. You don't love based on what is going on around you. You love because that's who you are, or because you, and this is really a type of love we are not used to, right? Most of us, when we're in a relationship, we don't expect to be loving independently of the environment, right? And this is where the Gospels really offer a radically new concept, right? This idea that you can love even if you're not loved in return. This is the fundamental essence of the teaching of Jesus, right? Which is very strange to us. I mean, to be honest, I came very late to understand Christianity. I think it takes having been broken 1,000 times into 1,000 pieces to understand the teachings of Jesus, right? It's not easy to understand such a kind of radically shocking teaching that we should love even if we're not loved. What? It doesn't make any sense, right? So the teachings of Jesus are really difficult to swallow if you haven't lived through certain things, right? You have to live through certain things to understand such a radically new idea, right? And this is what Kierkegaard is developing. He's saying, yes, we ought or we can. We ought and we can love independently of our surroundings. Remember Rumi when he said, be clear like a mirror reflecting nothing?
Yeah.
To not constantly be reflecting what the other person is doing, but to have your own, right? Your own sense of who you are and your own groundedness in your own love, right? This is what he's teaching us, right? To not be codependent, to be anchored in one's identity and in one's source, and to love not because you're receiving something, but because that is who you are, right? Does that make sense, Rodriguez? Rodriguez?
Yes, that answers my question.
Okay, good. Any other questions before we conclude? We have 2 minutes for one more question, if it exists.
Yeah.
Yes, go ahead.
Like, so my question is this, like, people have certain ways of showing love, but at the same time, people also receive love in different ways. So like, what is correct, I suppose, in terms of kindergarten, whatever his name is, when, you know, someone's way of showing love isn't the same way as someone's way of receiving it? Like, who has to, like, format themselves?
Okay, good. There's a beautiful teaching. I'm going to give you the name of this. It's a Buddhist monk called Thich Nhat Hanh. I think I spelled it right. He's very well known. He's everywhere in Barnes and Nobles, right? And he wrote a beautiful book on love called Teachings on Love, which I really suggest to everybody. And this is what he says in that book. He says, your beloved is a plant. And every plant has a special needs, right? Some plants need more water. Some plants need less water. Some plants need sunlight. Some plants need shade, right? So you have to, of course, you love your plant, right? So I'm thinking sometimes, oh, I love my plant. I'll put it in the sun all day and then it dies. So it's not enough to love your plant. You have to know your plant. You have to know what their specific needs are. And then you have to shift what you have to offer so that you don't kill your plant, right? So that's what Kierkegaard, I think, would say if he would develop the idea. Your beloved is a plant and you have to learn. You have to learn what they need. Do they need a lot of water? Do they need less water? Do they need time apart? Do they need more time together? Do they need you to help them? Do they need you to leave them alone? What do they need? And based on that, you fine-tune your actions and you love them in a way that nurtures them rather than smothers them, right? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So
thank you.
We have to learn our plant, right? Once your beloved comes into your life, ask, learn, right? Investigate. How do you want to be loved? Yes, I am used to loving in this way. I'm from this culture, so we do things like that, right? But sometimes it doesn't work. You have to then begin to kind of be more flexible, fine-tune, polish, arrange, so that your beloved can understand what you're trying to say, can understand that you love. This is one of the main sad issues in love stories, right? Where they both love each other, but they don't speak each other's language. And so the message doesn't go through. I would suggest also pop literature, The 5 Love Languages, right? I'm sure you know this book. Did you guys know this book?
No.
I frankly forgot the author's
Yes.
name. One does. You know the author's name?
Yeah, I just read it.
Oh,
A couple years ago. Well, not just a few years ago.
yeah, it's an excellent book. Just look it up. If you can find the author, that would be great, Rodriguez. But yeah, this is a great book because we have different love languages. And sometimes you have to learn the other person's love languages. If you can help me, Rodriguez, the 5 languages are touch, words, time spent together, let's see, gifts.
Yeah, gifts.
One more. It's probably the one I need to
It's
work on.
Gary Chapman is the right one.
Thank you. What's the last one? Touch, words.
Wait, what did you say? Did you say gifts?
Yeah. Words of affirmation, time spent together, touch. That's probably
Touch.
this is the one I need to work on. It's not coming up. Okay, I'm putting those for now.
Distance?
No.
No. It's how we receive. His theory is how each person, how we love and how we receive love. Like some people express love through gifts. Some people express love through touch. Some people express love right through language. What's the other one?
Acts of
Emily
service.
just sent
Acts of service.
something. Yeah.
Service.
That's what it is. Acts of
Thank
service. The one I
you.
don't do.
Like that's the one I do, so I'm good. So okay, so that's a book to help you learn and discover there are other love languages than your own, and learning to speak that new language. Sometimes it feels a bit artificial, but as you learn, it becomes more natural, and your beloved is finally happy.
What is acts of service?
It's
So
kind
how
of like
oh, go ahead.
like like for instance, like let's say you have a partner who always tells you to wash the dishes. It's like if you
Mhm.
like go out of your way to take out the trash, wash the dishes, just mow the lawn, like do things like that, like without having to be told. Like you just do it because you know that that makes them happy.
Oh, okay. Makes sense then. Thank you.
You're welcome. Okay, good. Our time has come to an end. Whoever wants to stay behind, if you have questions on your test, we can look at that. Reminding you, we have class on Thursday. You have a new reading assignment, the last section of Kierkegaard, and make sure you send your reading assignment to the tutor before class. I think that's all I wanted to say. So you guys can leave the meeting, and I'll stay with whoever has more questions, whoever needs to talk about their test, you can stay behind. The rest of you can go.
All right. Thank you, miss. Enjoy your day. Bye-bye. Bye, peoples.
Hi.